So the question is, how do we know if a baby's HIE diagnosis, if it was the result of negligence? In other words, negligence is what caused the injury or the harm. To be able to understand this, we have to back up, and you have to understand when we're talking about negligence, what does that mean? Does it mean what people normally might think in the everyday world for negligence? Or does it mean something else? And so when we're using that term negligence, it has a very specific meaning legally. And to be able to understand negligence, we're gonna jump back and I wanna help you understand these four major elements that make up negligence. And the first one is whether there was a duty, whether there was a breach of that duty, which caused, number three, caused the number four, the damages. And for damages, we're talking about in this context, the injury or the harm. And so flowing from that is generally, well, Marcus, how do I know if it was the hospital or the doctors or the nurses? How do I know if it was their negligence, which is what caused my baby to suffer this injury? We also have to, when we're looking at those four elements, there are other issues that are also present too in the medical malpractice realm. And that is whether there was a deviation from the standard of care which caused the injury or the harm. And so to be able to understand that standard of care and whether there was a deviation from the standard causing the injury or the harm, we have to use medical experts. We have to use experts who will give opinions as to not only what was the standard of care, in other words, what was supposed to be done, but whether the doctors or the nurses, whether they departed from that standard of care, causing the injury or the harm. And we do that, we're able to do that by not only interviewing the family or parents, mom and dad, talking to them, but we also have to look at the medical records. We have to look at the records to see what was going on. So we're going to want to know, for example, what was happening with the prenatal, on the prenatal side. What was showing up on the prenatal side? Was mom dealing with certain things? Gestational diabetes? Was there any infection issues? Like a whole host of things that we're looking at on that prenatal side. And then we are going to move from there to, if there was just a birth was in a hospital, what was showing up during labor and delivery? What do the records show during labor and delivery? And in that analysis, not only are we looking at mom's complaints and what mom was going through during labor and delivery, if there were any complaints, but we're looking at what was happening on the electronic fetal heart monitor. So were there certain readings on the electronic fetal heart monitor? Because that monitor in real time helps doctors and nurses be able to understand what is going on with your baby. And so there are certain things that are going to be there. There are going to be certain patterns and there are going to be certain readings that birth trauma attorneys like myself that we know how to look at, and we know how to analyze it and what to talk with experts on regarding these specific readings. So I'm helping you understand in this video today, all of this has to go into play or into place for us to be able to understand whether it was negligence that caused the injury or the harm. Remember, when we're talking about a baby suffering a traumatic brain injury like HIE, there are other things which can cause that injury or harm. For example, is there a genetic condition? If you've got a genetic condition that is out there, then of course that genetic condition is probably going to be the cause or the injury or the harm. Same thing with if there was a developmental issue present. That is more than likely going to be the cause of the injury or the harm. Now, I want to also make sure that you understand, if you're watching this video, that you understand that genetics and that developmental. You want to make sure also that these are truly the causes and these are truly what is happening, because sometimes you can have, doctors and nurses may initially think that it was genetics, but then as this process goes on, maybe a second opinion doctor or other professionals are looking at it, maybe that genetic issue may not be the case. That's not always going to be, but sometimes it's not necessarily going to be genetic. So I know I talked about a lot here, but I'm trying to help you understand that question of whether that HIE diagnosis, whether your baby's HIE diagnosis is going to be the result of negligence. And through this video, you're able to see the analysis, you're able to see the breakdown that has to occur when a birth trauma attorney, when a family contacts a birth trauma attorney, to be able to help them understand whether it was negligence which caused the injury or whether it was something else. If you have more questions, maybe you're watching this video tonight because your baby has suffered an HIE diagnosis, or maybe not only is there an HIE diagnosis present, but there's a subsequent cerebral palsy or CP diagnosis at play too. If you have these types of questions, what I invite you to do is go ahead and pick up the phone and call me. There's a telephone number on the screen down below, and I invite you to call me and talk with me about your baby story. Remember, it costs absolutely nothing to talk with me initially about what is going on with your baby and with your family. One more thing, you got to remember that when you call my office, make sure that when you talk to my secretary, that you give them a date and a time on my calendar. That way I can know when to return your call and when to talk with you. So that's important. Make sure you pick a date and a time. And one more other thing. I practice law here in the state of Maryland. And I know this video is on the internet and it's on social media platforms and other places. And I cannot control who's going to contact me. If you are not in the state of Maryland, please understand that we have to use what we call co-counsel or local counsel. In other words, an attorney in your state. And that's something that we can work to help you on and give you information on. But I just want to make sure that you understand that co-counsel or local counsel aspect of things if you're not here in Maryland. All right, that's going to be it for tonight's quick educational video. Again, I'm Marcus Boston, and I'm one of the childbirth injury and medical malpractice attorneys practicing law here in the state of Maryland at Boston Law Group, LLC. And we'll talk with you next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.